Hi, can we start? Are we all settled? Colleagues, colleagues, can I please request you to take your seats? Okay, thank you. Guys, can we please settle? Sneha, Shreya, sorry. Okay, thank you. Thank you. We do have one of our ally who's joined us online. Thank you, Masoom. And thank you also for being patient with us while we are scattered.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Testing. I said testing.
Yes.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. So I will welcome Masoom Minawala, who's joined us online. For those who've joined us only for this session, I will introduce Masoom again. Masoom is a global fashion influencer and entrepreneur who champions South Asian representation on international fashion platform. She uses her platform to promote financial independence of women and their economic empowerment. Welcome, Masoom, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Am I visible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I will also request Jinisha from UP Warriorz to join us here at the stage. Jinisha represents strength and resilience with UP Warriorz, which is a formidable team in women's cricket, inspiring young athletes across the country. Their dedication and teamwork are a testament to the power of sports, in empowering women and breaking barriers. I will now request Nikhil, who represents Yuvaa. Nikhil Taneja co-founded Yuvaa, which is a youth media and insights company that creates content reflecting the voice of young India. Through storytelling and impactful campaigns, Yuvaa addresses critical social issues, fostering a generation of informed and active change makers. Thank you, Nikhil. Requesting Nikita from Be Badass also to now join us here. Be Badass is an empowering community that encourages women to embrace their true selves and live unapologetically. Through workshops, events, and online content, they inspire women to break free from societal constraints and lead bold, authentic lives. From Pink Legal, requesting Manasi to join us here on the stage as well. Pink Legal is India's first ever legal resource platform dedicated to women. The Pink Legal organization provides comprehensive legal information and support to empower women with knowledge about their rights. Their mission is to make legal resources accessible and actionable for all women in India. Thank you, Mansi. Requesting Nikita from SSERD to join us, please. SSERD pioneers in space education and works to empower students with knowledge and skill in space sciences and technology. Their program aims to create future leaders in the space industry, promoting STEM education among young women. Finally, also Priya Malik. Priya Malik is an acclaimed poet and spoken word artist who uses her powerful words to address social injustices and gender issues. Her evocative performances challenge societal norms and encourage a culture of empathy and equality. I'm also happy to share that we do have one more generation equality ally who unfortunately could not join us either online or in person, Zeenat Aman. I think we do not need any introductions to her, but still, she is an iconic Bollywood actress and a trailblazer who broke stereotypes and redefined the image of women in Indian cinema with her bold and fearless roles. Her legacy continues to inspire future generation of actresses to challenge norms and embrace diverse representation of femininity. With that, I'll hand over the panel to Susan. Thank you.
So I'm going to try to use this microphone as well. Let's see how we go. Just because I'm going to make some opening remarks to the panel, and then I'm really looking forward to talking to you all this afternoon. But thank you again, everyone, for coming, everyone from the media. It's really wonderful to have you here as well, because this really is a partnership with the media, social and otherwise. So thank you for coming. So, we know that with the digital revolution, social media has really become rapidly integrated into every aspect of our life almost, from, education, so formal education, through to even finding your husband or wife or partner. So, on the one hand, online spaces and digital tools can facilitate incredible access to knowledge and power because of that. But on the other hand, they also have the, you know, converse effect of facilitating violence against people. So they can be, you know, these spaces are both incredibly good and also incredibly problematic. So they can also really perpetuate gender norms and stereotypes, as well as disrupting gender norms and stereotypes. So there's some recent research called the Levers of Change, and it found that the media really is instrumental in cementing in stereotypes at times. So, you know, much of the media continues to portray people in very stereotypical roles. And respondents of this research believed that actually it was more likely to cement men's roles, which I found really interesting. But, you know, as I said, the digital revolution really does have an incredible way of opening up ideas of norms and our roles as men and women and people also with diverse genders. And just turning to online facilitated violence, the Institute of Development Studies found that between 16 and 58% of women that they had surveyed had experienced technology facilitated gender-based violence. That's an enormous amount. And if you think of this room, that's, you know, the majority of people in this room who may have experienced that kind of violence. And the Economist Intelligence Unit found that 38% of women have had personal experiences of online violence, and 85% had witnessed online violence against other women. So the most common forms of this violence were misinformation and defamation, that was 67%, cyber harassment, that was 66%, hate speech, 65%, impersonation, 63%, hacking and stalking, 63%, astroturfing, it was 58%. I mean, a whole range of these kinds of violence are perpetuated in new ways. So UN Women's own research shows that the COVID-19 pandemic increased digital violence against women and girls as we all, men and women, girls and boys, moved online for work and school and social activities. In fact, data from India, Sri Lanka and Malaysia showed a 168% increase in this kind of online violence during COVID. And of course, of this kind of violence, it's younger women, girls, who are most likely to experience it. So we've also found that women in public life, human rights defenders, activists, journalists, lawmakers, and women politicians also face increased risks of violence through the digital world. And in fact, UNESCO found that 73% of women journalists experienced online violence in the course of their work. So this is something that sadly unites women from all different walks of life. So you can love it or hate it, but social media, it's here to stay. And we need to leverage it and use it as a tool for positive change. And we also need to recognize that it represents us as we are with all our flaws, but it can also be used to change us for the better. And the Generation Equality Allyship, and these are some of our allies here today, was really launched to leverage the power of the online world and to really be able to reach many, many more people than we and UN Women can reach, with messages of change and positive messages about the roles that women and men, girls and boys play in the world. So we're really thrilled to have our allies here today, and also that people do come from different ages, different ethnicities, different walks of life to join this friendship and network with us. So without further ado, I'm going to move back to here and start asking you the question. So I'm going to turn first to you, Masoom, and thank you for joining online. And I believe that you're one of our oldest allies, as in the time that you have been engaged with UN Women. And you've consistently spoken about the gender bias when it comes to funding women-led initiatives and enterprises. What do you think is the best way to change these norms and push more people to invest in women?
Well, thank you firstly for having me, and it's truly been an honor to be an ally for years now and continue to work towards gender equality in all its spectrums. I think when we're talking about funding specifically, the problem that I observe is one that I've experienced myself, and I think it does get you're able to really understand something when you've lived it, right? Versus when you're just observing it and you have some sort of a estimation of what it could be. So I think I have myself dealt with that gender bias when it came to raising funds for my e-commerce startup. This was about 5 to 6 years ago. And I saw that there is a very obvious inacceptance in terms of the mindset, right? I think we need to have simply probably more women in the decision-making roles, right? So I think when we're looking at the investors in our country, when we're looking at VCs, when we're looking at the funds, I think we need to talk about how many women are there in those leadership roles, because that plays a huge impact, right? Because once again, I come down to it. So it's only when you've lived it and experienced it, are you honestly and authentically motivated to make that change. As an outsider, if you're coming in as an observer, I think it sometimes can get a bit surface level. So, one of the changes that we're looking at is, so I personally invest in startups myself. And then something that I try to do at my level and I encourage is to invest in more women-founded, women-run startups, because I do think that that is an area that, is needed. But I think we all have to look at sort of our individual roles in society and how we can create that difference and make that impact. I work in social media, and my power truly lies online and in the community I have. So how am I actually elevating my platform and using my voice and using my community to talk about these gender biases? So quite honestly, this relationship with UN Women has been great, because we've been able to actually address so many of these topics and break so many of these taboos, even if it means actually just raising awareness about how terrible the stats are currently. But I think even just raising that awareness within the community that I have really is able to drive change. So I think driving change can move from creating awareness to uh, creating a movement to taking action from your perspective, to also taking action from a community's perspective. But I think it needs to start with the I, me, and myself approach, and then move to a you and others approach.
Thank you very much. And I think that's so interesting, because I think a lot of us here today would be doing the work we're doing because of our own experiences in life, actually, that have kind of motivated us to see there needs to be change and to keep us passionate about that. So, and it's fantastic to hear that you're also investing in women's enterprises and women's initiatives, because you've been through the difficulty of getting that investment yourself. So thank you, Masoom. And actually just turning a little bit now to sport, and you, Jinisha, you're in cricket, and there are many gender biases in the whole domain of cricket and sport generally. though it's amazing to finally that the Olympics had 50% men and women competing for the first time. And what year is it? 2023, and we finally have equal, representation. But, can you talk a little bit about how gender equally Indian system is and how we can sort of equip girls to grab more opportunities and perhaps boys to sort of open up more spaces also?
Thanks. No, it's great to have this conversation after the Olympics, of course, because it's a very positive experience when you hear that globally it was a near 50-50 split in the number of representation. But when you're coming back to India and you start to look at what is the sporting ecosystem, and from my own experience, I'd like to talk more about cricket. Of course, it's taken WPL to kick off. 16 years of IPL had to take place for WPL to kick off, but what we've learned is that India has been one of the first countries to introduce pay parity in cricket, right? Which was amazing because we got to hear a lot from the athletes themselves on what kind of an impact it's had. And just after WPL started, what we've seen in the last 2 years is that this has been the busiest time for female cricketers. So suddenly, because WPL, which is a commercial property, has started, athletes are getting paid, you see that state associations have become really interested in having more cricket, having more of their athletes go up there and get selected and represent their state as well for teams like UP Warriorz or an RCB or a Delhi Capitals. So it's been really a positive experience, but I guess there needs to be more commercial properties available, or a way to not just look at sport as sport itself, but also as a business. And probably that's the gap that I see currently when in other sports. So if you're looking at anything outside of cricket, which is true for both men's and women's sports, there is a huge gap when it comes to conversations around taking it on a professional level, whether women are taking it seriously or not. We're also invested in another sport, which is Kabaddi, which is an indigenous sport in India. But most of the athletes that work with us are semi-professionals. So they all have jobs beyond the time that they come and play with us. So which means that they haven't been able to successfully convert themselves into pro athletes, which means that the opportunities are also lesser. So I think it's kind of sport dependent in India, because the way that we look at sport is that we worship our athletes and we worship cricket especially, which has two sides of the coin. But based on what you're talking about, the gender-based violence, what we observed in right from the beginning of WPL was that athletes were being judged on their physicality. And I was seeing a lot of comments on the color, on the body shape. We were looking at, and I could see that the athletes were also going through comments and getting rather affected, that it was not so much about their performance and about this amazing opportunity that they finally have to come and showcase the skills that they have on such a huge platform where they have more than 150 million people watching. So we wanted to work on, and we continue to work on, how do we combat that, because we want to change the opinions that can women play just as well as men, and I think they've done enough and more to prove that they can. Is the game going to be boring? Because do they have enough strength to hit the ball out of the park? I think, again, we last season, we had somebody who smashed one of the cars, which, it's not something you see very often. So I don't like to say that women have to prove themselves, but I think we've had enough and more examples where they've shown that that women's cricket is just as fun, if not more.
Thank you. So again, turning to a completely other sector, which is science, technology, etc. So, we know that, yes, so for you, Nikita. So we know that, India has some of the highest number of women studying STEM at universities. I think at least last year it was 43%. But then it's hard to kind of convert that into jobs. So, I'm really interested to hear what you think about that. Why does this gap exist when it comes to jobs for women? And I think also, just getting back to you, Jinisha, you've just sort of said that one of those issues is investment, actually, and that's what Masoom was also talking about earlier. So I wonder if that has partly a role to play in investing in women scientists also.
Right, Susan. So we've had great women scientists in India, from India, and we've also had people in greater positions when it comes to organizations. Now, the only problem is here with the numbers. Why aren't we able to reach that numbers, or why there is a gap in the number? I see two things as a big challenge, right? And we need to work on it. One I see is giving an opportunity, right? When you think a woman from science background now taking lead or moving to a position where she could lead something, now that's the opportunity which one must give, where you move forward. When only when someone see them moving forward in terms of their career, that's when they get interested, excited, and they want to grow bigger in their life. So one is the opportunity. Second, it is very much interconnected with the first point, that is the role model. This is something which personally I have felt, when someone needs to decide, I want to stay back in this domain, or when someone decides, do I have an opportunity in this domain, all we look at is for a role model. Has someone done that before? And when you don't find enough examples of someone doing that, you feel like probably it's not possible, specifically in the science domain. Like, and this is what I tell all my students, the younger ones, that it's okay if you don't find someone in the domain that you're looking for. Why don't you become that first person, right? And this is what I tell younger ones. But then again, how will one become a role model when opportunity is given, right? So that's where I feel we could reach those numbers. One, to tell everyone or give an opportunity, because we know that we do the best. We have that multitasking capability of handling things, which means we can do it, and it just must be given an opportunity. Again, I think here investing in the person is something that again comes in over here as well.
Yep. And the role of the family also in encouraging their girls to take these opportunities.
Absolutely. That's something that I faced when I was doing my programs. I ensured that the programs that I did, I made parents sit, right? Because when I'm inspiring the students, okay, take science, take space, and do this, you can do that. And then they go home and say, I want to become this. Let's say not now, after 2-3 years, and the parents say, there's no opportunity in this. And that's when students going to give up on their dream. So I want parents also to know that if there is no opportunity, you're going to go create that opportunity. They would be someone. So yes, family, parent support is very much needed in this.
So, and then turning to families and, men and women's roles. And, I mentioned this morning, I think, Nikhil, the importance of men and boys being engaged in this kind of social change, really. And so I know that you're really doing a lot of work on that. And I think we're all really interested to hear more about what you do and the impact that your work has had on changing some of the stereotypical ideas of what men and boys should be also. So you have a Be a Man, Yeah podcast. And I know that you try and break down masculinity sort of issues in that podcast. So, tell us a bit more about this.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, Susan, for the wonderful question. And again, you and women for this gathering. I'm so happy that we could be part of this. I think every time I come to a gathering like this, it's always the first thing I recognize is that how few men there are in a gathering like this. And that is the challenge we're trying to overcome. Because unfortunately, men, and especially young men in our country, in fact, I would say globally, look at gender rights as a women's issue and not as a human issue. It's not seen as something that men should participate in. It's always seen as, oh, it is something of for by women to benefit women. But men don't even understand the fact that uh, they are also, going to get empowered if women get empowered. And that's really the challenge, actually. We do a lot of interventions in colleges. So my company Yuvaa is a youth media company. We work a lot with young people in across the country. I have personally been to over 150 campuses in India right now over the last 5 to 6 years. Everywhere that I go, the constant thing that I hear from women is, unfortunately, right now they still talk so much about harassment that women get in public spaces, even at home. Sometimes it's really, it's tragic, it's heartbreaking to always hear that that's the number one thing, the number one issue that till date women have in our country. And we see that in news headlines everywhere, and it is quite, we're still not able to guarantee women's safety. How will we move forward as a nation? At the same time, when you ask young men what is the thing that they are going through, or what is the thing that, what is an issue for them, the number one issue that men actually speak about is loneliness. They talk about the fact that they don't have anyone to express their emotions to. They don't have safe spaces where they can feel not judged, where they can actually speak their heart out, be vulnerable without anyone telling them you are not man enough. You are, in fact, my chat show, Be a Man Yaar, is aimed at almost taking agency back of that term, that be a man is typically told to young boys when they are, if someone's showing crying, it is said, be a man, don't cry, and men don't cry. If someone's showing some sort of, if they're in pain and a boy is expressing that pain, it's said, be a man, don't express that pain. And then our idea is that we're going to create a chat show, we're going to create a space where men, just iconic Indian men, can come and be vulnerable. And I, as the host of the show, try to create that space for them, that in this safe space, if both of us can genuinely just be vulnerable with each other, hopefully other young boys and men are going to be look at it and be like, okay, perhaps there are spaces that can exist and I can also create that in my life. Because unfortunately, and I'm going to just make this last point, I think the larger issue right now is that when we have gender sensitization or gender understanding, it is again aimed very much at women. It is not aimed at, we don't include men in the conversation on gender. So because of that, what has happened is men have unfortunately become, almost young men in particular, have become antagonistic to the idea that women are getting empowered. What about us? We are the victims, which is obviously not true. Women have been oppressed for centuries, etc. But given that there is so much conversation about the fact that, and this is what I constantly keep hearing, which is just sometimes sad and sometimes very terrifying, that the way that they're looking at it is that, oh, okay, we are talking about women empowerment and women are getting reservations in buses and women are getting XYZ, they have feminism, etc., etc., they have communities, no one cares about us, etc., etc. And that understanding is now being weaponized. When you are giving those statistics, so many of those statistics are coming from men who have weaponized that idea, that look what women are getting and you are not getting. So when we talk about and it's scary also for me. I have just been on the road in campuses right now, hearing young men bring up these issues constantly. Anytime then we speak about gender, the first question is, I was in a campus yesterday. I won't name the campus. I was in a very, very big campus in India. The first question that is asked to the panel when we talk about gender is, if women can wear skirts in the office, can men wear shorts? And I'm just like, I have to sit and explain to them that women are not your enemy. The enemy, it's a common fight against patriarchy. It's not a fight of men versus women. But the problem is that, unfortunately, we as a society have also, we're now starting finally telling women that you don't need to be nurturers, you can also be providers. But we are not having the other conversation. We are not telling men that you don't have to be providers, you can also be nurturers. So men are constantly still moving forward in life thinking that's our role in society. We have to be providers. Whereas, fortunately, at least in a certain subsection of society, women are recognizing that they have the agency. Men don't recognize they have the agency. They do. They benefit from patriarchy. They just don't understand that yet because we're not having those conversations. So again, my show is aimed at starting those conversations. It's aimed at, again, it's not an opinionated show. It's a show about emotion. It's about men just expressing themselves so that other men can look at and feel that it's okay for me also to have empathy. Because I feel like the anger that men have against women is coming from a lack of empathy towards women. But that lack of empathy actually comes because they don't have empathy for themselves first. Because the empathy has been conditioned out of men. Men have been told that you cannot be empathetic. To be real men, you have to showcase a sense of not having pain in your life, being strong all the time, being macho all the time. So we need more such conversations. I'm so grateful that I am in a forum like this where I'm able to have that conversation as well. I just want, our challenge ahead is how do we ensure that men as much as possible are getting more involved in this conversation so that we can do sensitization at that level across society. Because if otherwise, those instances are going to continue if men don't even recognize that they need to be held accountable for their actions, but in a manner where we don't do it as a after the thing, but much before, in advance.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I think that you're right that often with equality, it's sort of seen as zero sum, like if the woman gets more rights, the man gets less rights. It's like a seesaw. But actually, it's not about that. It's about if women get more rights, actually men will benefit from that too. And I think that there's some, research that also shows that, with gender equality, if men are able to spend more time with their families, they have better relationships with their children, and that adds enormous value to the meaning of their life. So actually changing the roles and the stereotypes means we all benefit from that. So we have to get to that perspective and we have to engage with men on that, I think, because there is a lot of fear about what they'll lose.
No, you're absolutely right, Susan. I'll just add that point. And again, our show is a very feminist show, because on our show, our intention also is to get men who are good husbands, who are good partners, who are good fathers, who are good sons, and then have them talk about the women in their lives and talk about the roles that they are playing that they really, really love. We have got so many men who are nurturers and who love speaking out aloud that we like being nurturers. And they also talk about the challenge, unfortunately, in society that comes. Like there was in season 1, we had an episode with a really famous TV actor, Nakul Mehta, who's a dear friend of mine as well, who spoke about recently having a son and saying that he's faced judgment from a lot of friends that he has had in his life because he did not go to work immediately after having a son. And nobody asked that question to his wife, which is sexism, because you're just like, oh, you are sitting at home, obviously, after giving birth, that is, you're not expected to work. At the same time, unfortunately, it is also sexism that you are thinking that, oh, why is a father not going to office? Who is going to make, who's going to earn for the family? Isn't that your role? And he's like, no, my role right now is just to be a father. I have had a child. Why can't I spend time with my child? He's like, he's had that conversation so many times over. And it is, and I think the challenge is how do we have these conversations as empathetically and as sensitively as possible?
Yes,
You're
that's right.
absolutely right. This is not a zero-sum game. It is about humanity. It is about human emotion. But we need to ensure that in the aggression that a lot of men have weaponized, they've weaponized this idea that, this is a zero-sum game. They get angry about it. They get aggressive about it. They make other men believe that there is a common enemy over here, which is just so untrue. But the alternate is to create narratives, especially through social media, especially through content, especially through video, especially through the media, where we give, again, amplify those men and those voices and those content pieces which are nurturing and which show men in a very positive space.
Yes, actually, the amount of times I've been asked myself, well, who's looking after your children? Well, their father. So Manasi, just turning to you now. So we've sort of talked a little bit about some of the legal aspects around, women's empowerment. But I'm really interested in hearing more about your Pink Legal, the clubs that you run across many college campuses. And you were saying, many around the country, including in Delhi. And I know that these clubs have been really instrumental in raising awareness about, legal issues and gender equality. And I'm really interested in hearing from you how you think, if we take one of these areas, which is sexual harassment, how do you think that things are changing on campuses? Do you think that women are accessing the provisions in the POSH Act? What's happening in that sort of milieu?
Thank you, Susan. A very, very important conversation to have, because I think college and high school is when we're at a very impressionable age, and these are formative years. So it's important that we have safe campuses and safe spaces where we can, focus on our education instead of issues like sexual harassment. So what we have seen, so we have Pink Legal clubs, which are basically, self-initiated student clubs in high schools and colleges. And these clubs go around in their communities, creating awareness on legal rights, as well as, starting conversations, important conversations about women empowerment through various ways, whether it is through a movie or a workshop or street plays, etc. So over the course of time, since we have these clubs in various campuses and we always give them certain themes to work with, we've noticed that one of the premium colleges in our country, one of the premium law schools, it saw an increase in the number of sexual harassment cases being reported. Though it is a law school, and we presume that law students will definitely be aware of not only their rights but also know that this is not something you're supposed to do. Despite that, there was a rise in the number of cases being reported. So the Pink Legal Club that we have in this college, it took up sexual harassment as the theme for that particular quarter and the coming quarters. They started creating a lot of awareness, not only about what the law says about sexual harassment, but also about examples of sexual harassment in day-to-day lives, which maybe, you don't realize that what you're doing is a form of harassment or verbal abuse or emotional abuse. So they created awareness, and awareness, I believe, is the first step, because only when you know that your rights are being violated can you stand up for them. So this went on to create a safe space in that campus, where the club and the club members sort of became a safe space for students to come and to report or, to talk to them about what they are going through, to understand, to kind of discuss what the right course of action should be, because often college students may find themselves in, college campuses are sometimes like jungles, right? You find yourself lost, you don't know whom to approach, you don't have a confidant who can guide you on the right path. So the clubs became the safe space for college students to come and express themselves, to guide them on what course should you take, how should you go report this particular action. So not only, sexual harassment on campus, but there was another incident where one of the members of Pink Legal. So I think any woman walking on on our streets would have definitely faced sexual harassment, catcalling, or what we call eve teasing in India. And it's so normalized that we often just ignore it, forget trying to take action against it. So this girl, she actually took it up. She went to the police station, she filed a police complaint, she made sure that this offender was called to the police station, and action was taken against him. She didn't let it go. And by doing this, she sent out a very clear message to this man that whatever you do, your actions have consequences. I'm sure he will think 100 times before repeating this the next time. And he'll probably even go and tell his friends that, look, this is what I faced, so you better not do this again. So these are small instances or examples where, we see that there is a shift, and the shift starts from creating awareness. So because, this member of Pink Legal, she knows her legal rights, being a part of, this entire environment, she could go and stand up for herself, and she could go to the police station. So I believe that youth and, self-initiated actions in different pockets of society are very important to create a collective domino effect and to create a larger change that we all want to see.
That's so interesting because it's beyond awareness, isn't it? You know, and I think that often people think prevention is awareness, but it also has to be linked to action and so that people can see change and feel that they have some control over what's happening, which is more than just passively accepting information. So that's great to hear that, again, young women are sort of standing up and really taking some risks in taking action also to reduce this kind of harassment.
And I think just,
Please.
I think when a woman takes an action or a young girl takes action, she sets an example for 10 women around her who feel emboldened to take action themselves. So I think it creates a ripple effect, which is very important.
That's right. And also, as you've said, if you don't have words for things, you can't understand it almost, you know, and I think that that's been the process of awareness within the women's movement over many years, is creating words where there were no words at times, and there still aren't words in different languages, I know, for domestic violence, for example. So, and that's a very old feminist idea that you have to be able to name something to understand it and to be able to take action. So, and then just, you know, continuing on with this idea of, you know, words and action, just turning to you, Nikita, you know, so of course, long-term social change happens through the laws, and that is really, really important. But also, I know that Badass, Be Badass, has been advocating for gender equality through pop culture and, you know, pushing progressive ideas and questioning gender norms online. And again, social media, it's such a fantastic tool for that. So if you can talk a little bit more about your online community and, you know, how do you sort of operate and what have you achieved in your work?
Thank you, Susan, for the question. I think, first of all, you mentioned pop culture, right? I think that's something that we use along with design, and it's so strategic because I'll give you an example. If you talk about a man stealing a woman's work, and you share a study on it, right? You share theory on that. That's boring. Nobody's going to read it. Nobody's going to consume it. The minute you make it about Taylor Swift and her manager, and you use that as an example, people will instantly, you know, want to know more about it. They would want to share more about it. And so it reaches a lot more people. So, you know, using pop culture for that purpose and using it very strategically is something that we really believe in and we try and do a lot of. We really, I think, you know, focus on picking up data heavy studies and surveys and decoding them and simplifying them so that more and more people can access it. So that's a very strong part of what we do, right? Other than that, I think, you know, we really believe in initiating important conversations. And so we've built the community very, very authentically. And initially it would really be a lot of work because I would be engaging with every single person in DMs and they would really reach out with their personal trauma. And it can get a lot. It's very triggering. It can get a lot. But, you know, over time, of course, we've built systems in place, but it's so interesting to see how people want to share a lot of personal stuff because they don't know who to talk to about this stuff, right? They don't have those platforms. They don't have any support systems, especially a lot of personal family stuff. And I know we talk about therapy a lot in privileged circles, but not everybody has access to therapy, you know? A lot of younger folks, their parents won't allow it. So they want to reach out and talk about the discrimination they face at home as well. For example, this is a very common thing in India. Parents will usually save up for their sons so that they can study further, but for their daughters, they'll save up for dowry, right? And I think what we try and do, I think, again, this is a very hard thing to do for us. Our content, we try to make people uncomfortable. The goal is never to please people with our content. We try and make everybody uncomfortable. And that is something we were very, very clear on. So now if you're communicating with somebody through your content and getting through to, imagine, a young girl and letting her know that, this is not okay. And then over a period of time, she understands and learns and maybe takes a stand and, says that, no, I would want to study further as well. Like, why should my brother get that opportunity only? I think these kind of little wins are really important. Of course, it's very, very hard to kind of quantify that and, pinpoint those things. But every now and then people will reach out and let us know that, I've walked out on an abusive boyfriend or whatever. And that's so incredible for us to see. Even how women engage in conversations and just comments. And I think we've discussed a lot today about trolls and, slut shaming and all that sort of stuff that women experience. And we experience that a lot. Like, as for us as a team, I'm sure like the women here, they experience it a lot. There's a lot of bad stuff said to us, about us. They'll email us. They'll really go out of their way to, be mean and horrible to us. And again, initially, it would be our job to kind of moderate that and take care of that. But it's so amazing to see that over the years, our team is like, we're your army, like we're going to take care of them. And it's not even hateful. It's not like the trolls come and, they'll be mean and they'll just use bad language, for example, right? So it's not that the women will come and just cuss back at them. They will really engage in meaningful conversations and try and get their point across, even if it is sassy. But that's so incredible to see for us that, women are taking a stand now and they don't mind being bold. They don't mind being called whatever it is that people would call them, aggressive or nasty or bra burning feminists. We get that a lot. But women are okay with it. They're accepting it. And so I think that for us has been like a big win, just like a community and seeing their behavior change. That's been incredible. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it must feel really good for you also to have other people on your side, because I think it can be very lonely if you're being trolled online.
Sure. I have to add to that, of course, Nikhil and Yuvaa does do a lot on, deconstructing masculinity and breaking down toxic masculinity. I have to say, in the last 1 or 2 years, especially, we have so many amazing men who have become, really hardcore community members, and they really engage in comments. They will, in fact, like reach out to us and be like, this is an interesting study I came across. You guys should cover it. And they really want to learn more and unlearn as much as they can. And sometimes they'll even reach out asking for resources that, hey, I came across this term or internalized misogyny. Can you talk a bit more about that? Can you explain that to me? Or my girlfriend is experiencing this issue. Can you help me with that? And that's really wholesome. So that, it's almost, we were talking about how it cannot be a one-way street. Men have to kind of step up a little bit, and we are seeing that change. And yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Really fascinating. And so on to you, Priya. And I think that, one of the most important ways to influence people beyond social media is the arts. There's always been, from ancient times, we can see arts have influenced culture in all different ways. And you are a practitioner of that. So you're a spoken word poet, and we'd really like to hear a little more about that. How do you do this? Does it come at a personal cost? How do you use your own art form to change, and what is the cost of that, and what do you also gain from that?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Susan. So I was always that little girl who wanted to express things. I grew up in a normal Indian middle-class family in a small town, but I would always question things. And I was given this little tool, this microphone at a very early age. My teachers were like, okay, you speak well, why don't you take the mic and do elocutions and debates? And I would recite other people's poetry, you know, the old man and the sea, oh, captain, my captain, that kind of stuff. And the moment the microphone came into my life, I realized that this is more than just me repeating other people's words. At the age of 12, I started writing my own poems. But as you rightly pointed out, Nikita, there were no role models. I never saw a woman with a microphone reciting poetry at all, ever, and that to her own poetry. So I did what everyone else does. You know, Oprah Winfrey has said, do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. So I did what I had to do. You know, I finished my year 12. I did my degrees. I have 4 of them. I was halfway through a PhD in Australia. I was working as an English teacher in a school. And I just had this epiphany. I was like, I really need to get my voice back. I need to get back up on stage because life has happened. I was almost 30 years old and I took part in an Australian poetry slam. As luck would have it, there was a poetry slam happening in Australia. I didn't even know what slam poetry was. It was one night I was depressed, suicidal, life was in shambles, and I was up at 2 a.m. Scrolling through YouTube, and I had this video of Neil Hilborn, Andrea Gibson, button poetry in New York. And there were these men and women and people from all genders just passionately reciting their own poetry. And I wrote Australian slam. Poetry slam came up. I was in Adelaide. And I had just gone through the worst breakup in my life. And I had this really angry breakup poem. And it was at the South Australian Library. And I participated in it. And there were 12 participants. And I didn't even know how slam poetry worked. But I learned it. And I went and I performed. And I remember I ended that poem with a... And I won that heat. And the audience are the judges. Like, you know, there is no like certain judge. And that became such a thing. I was like, oh, so this can be done. It was like, you know, sher ke muh pe khoon phir se lag jana. So it was like blood on my tongue again. And I think then I did not let it go. So from 18 to 30, no stage at all. And then 30, picking up the microphone again just changed my life. And then I realized I can do this for a living, but I did not have any role models doing that. So when I came back to India, the spoken word poetry scene was just germinating. It was Aranya Johar was already had already gone viral. There was Yaya Bhootwala. Those were pretty much the names on the circuit. And I started doing it out of sheer love for poetry, not to make a living, generally not even to go viral. I was doing TV and news and other things on the side, and I would go in the evening at the Habitat and just recite poems. And one day, one of my first pieces that went viral was called Right to Pleasure, which was a feminist piece talking about women's right to pleasure, bodily autonomy, reproductive rights, et cetera, et cetera. And the poem just hit millions right away. Then brands started coming in, you know, what I started doing for my soul suddenly became something that I could also do for my stomach. And I was like, okay, hey, you know, how your parents tell you, ye to side mein hai, poetry karni hai, to hobby ki tarah karo. I was like, maybe it is about time. Maybe now I can do what I want to do. And this is what I want to do. And I started doing poetry full time. I have a lot of feminist poems. All of them get a lot of crap online. But at the same time, they also get a lot of love online. You know, it would be unfair for me to say that there is only trolling and harassment and abuse. There is so much love. There is sheer adulation, men, women, all genders alike. And every time I read every single comment, I have a poem called Right to Learn. I have a poem called Art Has No Gender. I have a poem called, which was for Malala Education Fund, which is about educating women. I have the fanciest, most romantic love poems, which I also think is a form of rebellion. We don't see a lot of women being unabashedly honest and vulnerable about their feelings, like Amrita Pritam was, one of the first Indian feminist poets. So I think once I started realizing the power of words and the power that this microphone gave to me as a child, I just held on to it. And thankfully, the audience and the larger community also enabled that for me. But yes, it started off in your country. And I came back here and I just picked up on it, and God has been kind.
Would you like to recite one?
Yes, can I go to the podium and do that? Okay, great. Okay, so this poem is called Art Has No Gender because as female artists, we are often asked a lot of questions which are related to gender. And a lot of the poetry circuit also, especially the traditional mushaira circuit, hardly has any women representation. So spoken word poetry is here to change that. And this poem is called Art Has No Gender, and I hope you enjoy it. You can all hear me properly? Better now? Okay, good. You see? I'm sitting in a library, enclosed, encircled, encompassed with books, books with yellowed pages, scribbled notes, unfinished endings with beginnings that ended way before they even began. I see torn out pages flying before my eyes, pages which were dog-eared so long ago that they began to believe they were born that way. The wall in front of the library reads, "Art has no gender, but artists do." It is a sunny afternoon in 2024, and I have an interview question to answer. So, what is it like being a female artist? Well, same as being a male artist, except you don't get asked that question. You see, we female artists have a sordid history, a history defined by the rules of genitalia. In 1956, when a Sahitya Award Academy winning artist gets asked if she's only popular for her beauty and paraphernalia. I'm sorry, Amrita Preetham. It wasn't for your youth and beauty. It was for your progressive notions against heteronormativity. It was for your resistance and your rebellion and the stance that you held, the life that you lived and the battles where you bled. I'm sorry, female artists. It is 2024, and that wall in front of the library reads, "Art has no gender, but artists do." Rewind. 100 years before Amrita Preetham, in the land of beauty, bounty, and freedom. In 1859 lived the Bronte sisters of England, who began to publish their writing under a male pseudonym because their writing wasn't what we considered feminine. I'm sorry, Bronte sisters, but if it wasn't for your unfeminine words and letters, feminism would just be an F word that no one utters. I'm sorry, Frida Kahlo. I'm sorry, Amy Winehouse. I'm sorry, Simone de Beauvoir. I'm sorry, Arundhati Roy. It is 2024, and that wall in front of the library reads, "Art has no gender, but artists do." Fast forward. It's August 2024. Female artists are still considered more female, less artists. Our biology is under scrutiny. It is no less than a mutiny that 100 years forward or 100 years behind, we are still asking you to change your mind. We are asking you to not determine our art with a chromosome. We're asking you to look at art with a heart. So before I leave this library and begin to walk back home, I march towards that goddamn wall. The torn out pages are still flying before my eyes. I touch them, I fold them, and I scrunch them like they're stereotypes. I take down that wall. I crack it open. I shatter and smash those bricks like they're prejudices just waiting to be broken. I scream with the same childlike enthusiasm that Madame Curie must have had when she discovered radium, so I can stand in front of everyone in a stadium and tell them for once and for all that art has no gender, and neither do artists. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And how kind of refreshing for all of us as well, I think. So thank you very, very much. And with that, I'd like to thank all the panel, including Masoom, who's hopefully still online. And with that, I'll open up to if there are any questions from the audience to the panel. Any questions from the media? Yes. Do you want to just say who you are as well? Thanks. Yes, yes. You just have to press it on.
Basically, I'm Santosh Mehta. I'm a journalist, but I mean, I have heard all these panelists, but like Mr. Nikhil, what you said, we are also experienced sometime when, we go to buses, then, men said, earlier that, women are getting all the facilities, So I feel that now, do you think it is a change? Because I have heard you, but still I want to ask you and other people also.
No, ma'am, unfortunately, I think that I don't know how to answer this question because there are so many days that I get very hopeful because I see so many, what Nikita also said, so many feminist men. I see men who are trying so hard. I see men who are being kind. Like, again, I think there was this beautiful conversation I had, last year in my show where, I think it was Nakul again who gave this line. He said that we always see representation in pop culture of strong women, which is amazing. But at the same time, we should also have representation of vulnerable men, which is something we really, really need. When you are only seeing films like Animal and Kabir Singh and all of these really hyper masculine, toxic films, where is the space for vulnerable men? But there are vulnerable men among us. There are men who are trying every single day to unlearn the biases that they have against women, or unlearning the misogyny that has been conditioned into them by society, who are trying to be better fathers, better husbands. So many of my friends who have had babies right now, I see them I'm so inspired, right? What again Nikita spoke about in terms of role models. One of the reasons we've created that show is because I didn't have role models growing up. I have it's so, I mean, I want to get a little personal over here, but my journey, I would say, to being a feminist started at home, where my mother took all the labor of raising us, and my father was always in office. I didn't get time to spend with my father. I didn't get time to, I would see movies where father and sons play on weekends, cricket and all these sports, and enjoy and have like a father son bonding time. I got no time with my father. He was never around. And my mother would constantly do the labor of raising us and making us good citizens, without any appreciation from my father, without any appreciation from anyone in society. I would remember, like, going in the heat to tuitions. My mother would take us like 4, 5, 6 kilometers walking. We couldn't afford it at that time. Fortunately, we're in a much better position right now. And I would look at her, and at the same time, I'd see my father having anger issues, and which he would take out on all of us at home. And my mother would still, at the end of those outbursts, would make food for him. And I would ask, why are you making this food? And she's like, because that's my duty. And I was like, if that is your duty, then I don't agree that this is the relationship a man and a woman have to have. We need to do better. That's where I started. It is after many, many years when I got clinical anxiety. I was diagnosed with clinical anxiety a few years ago. I started going to therapy, and I started recognizing my father's point of view, which is that the therapist asked me this wonderful question. The first question she asked me, because my first session was entirely about how angry I am against my father. And she asked me at the end of the session, she's like, I'll just ask you one question. Do you think he wakes up in the morning and wants to be that? And I said, I don't think so. He said, exactly. He's also conditioned to be this way. He's also conditioned to be angry. And now I've gone across the country, and when I ask young people, what is it when you think of mother, what is the word that comes to your mind? The answer is love. When I ask, when you think of father, what is the word that comes to your mind? The answer is anger. This is the fight we have right now. How can men get to that nuanced understanding of why women need reservations? They don't understand the world is unsafe for women, because in their home, they've seen gender roles in a way where the father is the patriarch. And they think that is the role they have to occupy in society. So while a lot of them, have seen their mothers being the maternal, empathetic figures, unfortunately, because of patriarchy, even mothers sometimes become patriarchal. They also tell their sons that, your job when you have a wife is to be that patriarch of the family. So that we're not breaking those patterns. Until we break those patterns, and again, conversations like this need to happen. The content I think all of us are making in many different ways, there needs to be much, much, much more of that. We need acknowledgement. We need awareness. We need to fight this every single day. Only then can we get to a place where we can even answer questions like that. Because me sitting here and saying, yes, it's changing, I don't know if it is. I see both sides. I see a lot of men trying, and I see the other way where men are angry. Very, very. I mean, can you imagine 2 days ago? I mean, in Kolkata, we've just seen the case of a doctor being raped and murdered, a doctor in a hospital premises. That's the country we live in. When that is the safety, I mean, that is the situation in our country for women in our society. How can we even, I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, this is, I don't know. I wish like I have a more hopeful answer. I do see hope every day. I also see a lot of effort that needs to be put in every single way before we can actually sit down and say, yes, things are changing. maybe a little bit. We need to do a lot more to ensure that they go a long way.
I think what you said about these things, we all need to challenge them in our families as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, one of the things that we do from UN Women is try and build pieces of content on social media to encourage discourse about gender equality. Is there something any of you can think of that really stands out for you, like a piece on gender equality that you have seen on social media that you always think of or remember or has inspired you in some way? Sorry to
Great
put you on the
question.
spot.
Actually, I love what Bibaras does. So I love the sass that is there in their content because, it's putting a message out, but without being preachy. So when you see that post, you see that message, you're getting a subliminal message, but, you aren't really going out there to, oh, today I want to learn some moral, some morality. So I think they put up great content. And another campaign I really like is Unstereotype, which Yuvaa has been doing. So I really love that. Of course, now one of my new favorites, I've covered a new favorite. So I'm looking forward to, reading more of your content.
I just want to point out, thank you for asking that question because I want to bring it back to Lapata ladies. I was talking about it outside as well. I think it is such a great example of sparking conversations without having to be, I'm genuinely tired of being angry. It's 2024. Like I'm done. Like I don't even have the energy. So it's great that it conveys the message without having to be angry, without having to make it really out there. It's just there. It's so subliminal, so beautifully done. There is such good humor. I think that film is an excellent example of feminism and a lot of other social issues that the film has raised. It has sparked conversations. It shows rural India, जो मतलब 90% हमारा देश rural ही है और हिंदी में है. So this is another thing that I have learned over the years. I barely write in English anymore. I have started writing so much more in Hindi because when I came back to India, I realized that is the language of our masses, one of the most predominant language of our masses. And that has helped me amplify my content. My audience size has gotten twice the size what it used to be when I only stuck to English. So I'm bilingual and I write bilingually now as well, which has really helped. Yeah.
Should we take one last question if there is? Otherwise, we can.
I'll just add one thing to that because it's not a content piece in that sense, but I just loved that. I love the representation that Shah Rukh Khan has of positive masculinity at the same time feminism in his films, and like last year it was so interesting because Animal came out last year. It made 300 crores and it was a very toxic, very misogynist film. At the same and because my show BM Mania came out at the same time, a lot of media folks called me to ask for my quote. Oh, this has come now. You tell me what do you think? And I would always say that instead of looking at just you are saying that this film has made 300 crores, so toxic masculinity is on the rise. At the same time, can you look at Pathan and Jawan and how Shah Rukh Khan has actually showcased being a positive man and a really feminist man in those spaces. That in Pathan, his introduction scene in both the films, in fact, is Deepika in Pathan rescuing him. And he's just like, yeah, that's cool. It's okay. My masculinity is not getting challenged if Deepika is a woman is rescuing me from the bad guys, which is just beautiful. In the same way, the introduction scene in Jawan of his previous character is literally in a kushti, in a wrestling match, Deepika defeating Shah Rukh. And he's just like, yeah, that's absolutely okay. I'm okay with being defeated by women. There are so many feminist lines that they say in those films There is a way that he talks about women, the way he looks at women. There's no sexism anywhere involved. And I feel like we should just appreciate in mainstream films. I know that in many ways this can be seen as bare minimum, but I feel like any actor, any especially male actors who take that effort of ensuring that their depiction in cinema is sensitive, it is thoughtful, it is not sexist. I think I really appreciate that. So Shah Rukh Khan and then the way that he has showcased women and shown his love and appreciation and respect for men is something that I get really inspired by.
Thank you. So I think we'll wind up.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for joining us here and for such interesting conversations. And I'm sure that colleagues in the audience will also take back some of the key messages that we've been trying to spread on online platforms, but also offline platforms. Closing this session now. Thank you very much. We'll go back to our
Yeah, we should do a picture, Susan.
We'll just quickly do a picture.